Last month's Capitol attack revealed how online disinformation and conspiracy theories can have serious consequences. Three top tech and social media critics are revealing how disinformation goes viral and what policymakers can do to fix the problem. Our Dan Patterson spoke with venture capitalist Roger McNamee, Filipino journalist Maria Ressa, and Cambridge Analytic whistleblower Christopher Wiley. Here's what McNamee had to say about his plan to fix the internet.
They have to look at safety. And I think that's about making the engineers in these companies accountable for the work they do, the same way you would be if you were doing a building or creating a pharmaceutical or any other kind of engineering. Secondly, we need in the United States to take privacy very seriously. We need to think about the data we create as the equivalent of a body part, because if they collect a data voodoo doll of all of the data about us, and that is possible for any of these companies and many others, they can manipulate our behavior. The third area is competition. We have massive concentration of economic power in the technology sector, as we do in other sectors of the economy.
For more on this, let's bring in CBS News technology reporter Dan Patterson. Hi there, Dan. So let's discuss that three-point plan we just heard from Roger McNamee. How have lawmakers and even some social media platforms begun to tackle these issues?
So one of the key things that McNamee identified was data privacy, and we've seen the start of data privacy here in the U.S. In 2018, California passed the California Consumer Privacy Act, which was modeled a little bit after Europe's GDPR, which protects not just residents of the EU or citizens of the EU, but people who are actually in the EU. Now, this is a good start, but it's nowhere near what we need, which is what Roger suggests, a National Data Privacy Act. Now, when it comes to curbing dis and misinformation, we've seen many of the large social networks very recently, including YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, do what's called deplatforming, or removing content and users that they find objectionable or who have violated some of their policies. Twitter and Facebook have launched initiatives pretty recently as well. Twitter has a new program called Birdwatch, and Facebook launched their oversight board. Now, these are effectively letting third-party people and organizations make decisions about the content on their sites. Now, I kind of hesitate there because each is a little different, but when I talk to people like McNamee, Ressa, and Wiley, they say, look, these companies are just kind of offloading the responsibility for moderating content to kind of fancy-sounding organizations. Like in the case of Facebook, the oversight board is a number of respected individuals, but we've yet to see whether they really have any impact on disinformation on the site. Twitter is going to launch this kind of crowdsourced Birdwatch tool, which could be effective. It sounds novel, but again, it's offloading the responsibility of content moderation onto third parties.
Well, Filipina journalist Maria Ressa discussed how Facebook has evolved since its creation, and I want to play some sound from your interview with her. Let's listen to that.
I know what Facebook has become. It isn't the dream that it was. It may have been at a period of time, but right now it is a behavior modification system that prioritizes the spread of lies laced with anger and hate. And this research has already proven this. Lies laced with anger and hate spread faster and further than facts.
So, Dan, this is something I have heard her say time and again, but explain, what does she mean by a behavior modification system? And how does this fit into the propagation of conspiracies like QAnon?
So, Elaine, you have heard her say this before because Ressa is the victim of online harassment at very large scale that originated on Facebook. So when I talk to each of them, they suggest that, hey, look, algorithms are one of the primary culprits here. And that kind of sounds nerdy and techie. And look, what we really need to understand is that algorithms are just kind of if-then statements that select the content that we see in our news feeds. And one of the primary indicators or flags that they use is engagement. Do we like, comment, share, subscribe to content? Well, those are huge flags. And, when I spoke with Ressa as well as with McNamee, they said, hey, look, these algorithms kind of create forgive the metaphor, but a Truman Show, the old movie about Jim Carrey stuck in a bubble and he could only see the things in the bubble and it looked beautiful and perfect. But when we do that with algorithms, they can often normalize really toxic or often harmful types of communication and behavior, like conspiracy theories and other forms of dis and misinformation. So we're also looking at some of the biases that we have built into ourselves. These aren't bad things necessarily, but all of us are biased. And so when we click on something or share it, those biases feed the algorithm feeds us content. And then when we add the bias of programmers, we kind of end up with this weird concoction of content that is fed to us that really prioritizes one thing. That's engagement. All of these things are designed to keep us on the sites longer.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, Dan, we could honestly do a whole segment on just the algorithms because, as you point out, these are very complicated things that ultimately have human sort of biases built into them, whether or not those folks actually realize. So much depends on who's in the room, who's actually creating those algorithms. So it's really important to have that as part of this discussion. We're running out of time, Dan. Let me ask you this. Cambridge Analytica whistleblower Christopher Wiley referred to social media platforms as information ghettos. Let's listen to what he had to say.
When we ask why and how are these platforms, creating divisiveness, it's because we are creating, information ghettos on the internet. We are cognitively segregating people, and although they may sit beside each other now physically, mentally they are getting further and further apart. And so we're seeing a lot of the same kinds of effects that we saw previously, that in the civil rights movement, people fought for decades for integration of people, and we now have entire digital platforms which are creating these ghettoized segregated communities online.
So, Dan, you kind of touched on this, but whether it was intentional or not, why did these platforms become so divisive?
Well, look, time spent on site and engagement equals money. Look, the real important takeaway from what Mr. Wiley was talking about here is that it's not just about us liking different movies or TV shows and getting pushed into buckets of people like Marvel versus DC movies. No, this is about politics. It's about civil discourse. It's about our ability to communicate as neighbors, as Americans, as humans. When we are pushed apart from each other and we have financial motivations that push us apart, pushed by these incredibly powerful technology engines, there are real world consequences. And we saw those real world consequences on January 6th.
Hopefully, these kinds of discussions will help folks perhaps be a little bit more discerning about those sources of information and have a better understanding of what's behind some of these social media platforms. All right, Dan Patterson, always so great to have your reporting and insight. Thank you very much.
Great to see you.